Welcome back to Beyond Bitcoin with me, Derek Graham. It's a weekly podcast on Bitcoin, crypto assets, and the macro events shaping our digital world, with crypto traders, fund managers, and Bitcoin maxis as our regular guests. If you like what you hear, subscribe and click, and we'll keep you up to date with all things crypto. Yeah. No, I agree. Thank you. It's so true. It's lovely to listen to somebody that's sort of preaching the future that we've lived for so long. And that is that it makes logical sense to invest in this new asset class, because new asset class
you can tell rapidly. Your investors, look, sorry, Derek, I cut you off. But I say, look, you don't have to do a lot. Take 1% of your portfolio, 1%, and put it into Bitcoin and just see how it feels.
Yeah.
Get a Coinbase or Kraken or Gemini wallet. It's very easy to download, no problem. I had my daughter, 22-year-old daughter, who was refusing for whatever reason to even download the wallet. Anyway, she did. I finally got her invested into Bitcoin, a little ETH, and actually a little bit of Solana, but it's mostly Bitcoin. And now she looks it up, she checks on it, she reads stories about it, she'll become interested, and then she'll finally figure out what you've mentioned before about how Web3 and blockchain they're just so key and pivotal to our future. But you can't sit down and tell them that. You can't say, you must do this. You must do that. I said to my daughter, okay, you've earned a little bit of money in your job. It's time to invest some of it. And so when you say, look, this is the best performing asset of all time over the past 10 to 12 years, just do 1%. Put your toe in. Try it, right? That's the only way, I think, to get people. They have to learn it themselves. They have to read the books. Antonopoulos's books are fantastic. I love Jan Pritzker's book, Inventing Bitcoin. That's a 100-page book that actually explains how Bitcoin works, the engineering of Bitcoin in somewhat simple language. And I love Safieddine Amos's book on Bitcoin as well. So there are 3 or 4 books that you can read. Look, I read, I don't know how many, probably 50 books over the last sort of 6, 7, 8 years. Lots of articles. Twitter is a fantastic place to learn. Some of the smartest minds in the space are very active on Twitter. So again, the way to convince people is just to, tell them about the performance, give them the synopsis about what you think it is, and then just say, look, take a toe dip. Now, I'm not trying to convince you to put your life savings into this thing. Just, it's easy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think that is so true. And the standard conversation that I'll have with someone, if they want to sort of start to learn about this space, I just had it on Sunday, in fact. And the fellow said, do you think I should buy some Bitcoin? Laughing in a way, and looked at him and went, yes. And he goes, will it go up? And I said, yes, and down. But you should hold it. And it's your gateway to learn. What I find extraordinary about this on a macro scale, looking at this space, is that people don't quite get that this is a brand new asset class. The first new asset class since the Dutch invented equities in the 1600s. And it meets all the definition of a new asset class. There's no issue that it is. And in this new asset class, it's growing at such an extraordinary rate. And Bitcoin, of course, was the heralder of the asset class. And all these other things that we've talked about have been and grown since DePIN, decentralized infrastructure now is really fascinating. Sure. The likes of Helium products where you're generating income off a router. And there are so many other Web3 products that can go into this DePIN world. And what it is decentralizing infrastructure. It's decentralizing banking. It's decentralizing communication. these are quite tectonic when you look at it. And then there's the tokenization of real world assets. Dan, it's capitalized at $3 trillion. Real world assets are estimated at, there's a lot of numbers, but 400 to 450 trillion dollars of investable assets. Is this not going to be the greatest reverse takeover in history as those real world assets start appearing as digital assets?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think of it so much of as a takeover as I said, the two worlds will meet somewhere in the middle. I don't think equity disappears overnight. As you said, 1600, I don't think equity is a specific form of ownership where the governance structure is very clear, ownership is very clear. There's lots of legal precedent as well, lots of case law. The token world, which you've mentioned a few times, the tokens that incentivize people to engage in a network and actually, as you mentioned before, be compensated for either validating the network, or in fact providing content and then being incentivized with those tokens to provide content to that network. I think it just will take a little longer than maybe we all had hoped to go from one form of ownership to another. And that's why I don't see one world disappearing and just a new world forming. I think it's just it meets somewhere in the middle. I think equity ownership continues, but I also think token ownership spreads, and also, look, it gives the little guy also an opportunity to invest in certain things that he doesn't have an ability to invest in the old world. Certainly many of the venture early stage projects, some of them don't go well, some of them go well, but it is a whole new world. And token economics and tokens as an incentive mechanism, I think there are going to be a lot of certainly case studies written about successes and failures, but it is definitely a new asset class. It would be nice if someone would figure out how to properly regulate them so that we had a standardized format. I think the US is still figuring out what it thinks is a security and what is not, and there are other places around the world where it's more free-flowing. But I think we'd all be served really well if there was some standard format. I think we'll eventually get there, or regulatory format is really what we're talking about.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. It's often thought that this whole industry is just full of libertarians, and it's not, Dan. I'm actually not a libertarian, and my view of it is the same. It needs to have guide rails. It needs to have infrastructure, needs to have regulations. When it does, that means that, of course, larger investors are able to come to our funds, are able to come to this space and deploy to it because they understand the guidelines of which to play to. Terribly important.
Yeah, I also, though, appreciate the libertarian component. I think that this is, as you mentioned before, you said capitalism on steroids, or is that what you said? I do think it is one of the last places, certainly, where you have purely free money. Bitcoin is a free market. There's no government intervention. When Bitcoin goes down 20% in a day, no one supports it. It's a free market. And some people say, oh, some big guys manipulate it and it's only owned, but it's not. It really is. And I think it would be impossible to manipulate it, just given how decentralized the ownership is across the world. There's probably, I don't know if there's another asset that is owned, certainly across all the socioeconomic strata in all the countries of the world. I think and it's a lifeboat. Bitcoin has been a lifeboat for many people, especially living in the emerging markets. We never hear this story enough living in the US or Australia, but many countries have terrible monetary and fiscal policies, are constantly having their currencies devalued. There's fraud, there's corruption, and Bitcoin is a lifeboat for people in countries like Argentina and Venezuela, other places, Nigeria, where you've had massive devaluations, Turkey, and this is where usage is really high. And it's not because people are saying, oh, it's cool to do something in Web3. It's because their life savings are being saved. And that's a story we don't hear as much, but I think is really important. This store of value that is a protection against the traditional world's tendency to want to debase fiat currency. And again, it's less of a tendency in the places where we live, but it's much greater in the emerging world.
So the other interesting thing is that gold hoarders, investors as such, and Dan, many years ago, you were very active and focused on the gold industry. So culturally, that's part of what you're about. You still are, okay.
Yes,
so the gold holders will often say to me, this, your physical asset's it, you can keep it in a vault, it's the only way to go. And I often say to them, do you realize in the top 10 users of cryptocurrency, not just investors, users of cryptocurrency in the world, there's two countries that are quite interesting. One of them is Ukraine and the other is Russia. And when you look at that, you go, oh, wow, why would that be? For the same reason in both countries, and that is if you need to go across the border with your entire wealth can I show you, in a ledger. Thanks very much. You as one of the investors.
I think that's a great
wallet.
product. You should get the new wallet they've come out with, the Flex or Stacks.
All right.
Those are new. They just came out with. They're incredible. Yeah.
And so the thing about that then is that I've been immediately corrected. You don't even have to go across the border with that. You just need to know your private key. And I've said to people, so you try doing that with $1 million of gold and see how well you get across the border. The answer is you probably won't live. And so that starts making them realize that people can individually control and own their future in a wallet. You become the bearer of the asset. And that gives you your safety in countries that aren't America, Australia, Canada, Singapore.
Yeah, I can't really talk about Russia. There's lots of nefarious activity there, and I'm not really for nefarious activity. I don't know about Russia, but I will say that, look, the US dollar is still at the center of the world currency system. And I think in terms of, if I look out 10, 20 years, the fiat currency world is still going to exist. I don't think it's going to disappear. There are people who are saying, oh, fiat's going away. It's not going to disappear. Governments will never give up the right and ability to print currency. Now, the dollar is at the center of that, and everyone else is essentially, it's traded against the dollar. And I think that if you don't believe in that fiat currency system, that this is an out for you. And no one has ever had this kind of out before. Gold is sort of an out, yes. And physical gold is. But you're right, you can walk across anywhere, any border, or go anywhere with that ledger in your pocket. And it's self-sovereignty over your own money. And I think that's
right. And there's something very powerful about that.
I'm sorry?
I think there's something very powerful about that.
Yeah.
And that is that to control your own destiny, I think, particularly for the earlier generation that's coming through, is something that they can really relate to. Ultimately, Dan, if we can have a wallet which is very simple, but you can keep the title of your house on it, the intellectual property that you've created in the form of a patent or copyrights or whatever else on it, some fiat, some Bitcoin, some digital gold on it, it's yours. You totally control it. And then through DeFi, of course, you could always borrow against it, etc. You're taking away, yes, the role of an institution being in the middle there and providing the loans, but also you're empowering the incoming
I think that's
generation.
coming. So Derek, that's the end state, and it may be that all of those things can be held on your ledger. And I know that Ledger, which 100%. We invested in as a company, I know that they're working on many of these things. It could be that all of your items of value, however you want to call them, do sit on your ledger. And that, yes, it would be phenomenal if through DeFi you were able to actually borrow and lend against all of your digitized assets. Now that's the holy grail. And if anyone who's been still listening to us after 45 minutes and maybe they were thinking, what is all this about? The interesting, definitely thing is to think about that you have a little stick with everything of value that you have on there. And maybe your car title, deed, and maybe you borrow against half of the car that you own, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe it can be fractionalized as well. That's another aspect. Digitization brings fungibility. It brings immediate settlement. That's another thing. You can send a wire to someone in Africa. It probably takes you 2 weeks. It's instantaneous settlement. There are lots of things. There are lots of benefits to the digitization of value and items of value. When I say items of value, the deed to your house could be an item of value that isn't necessarily money. I think it's all ahead of us. And I think the fact that you and I still have difficulty going out and talking to 50-year-old people out there just tells me, who don't quite get it, just tells me that we're focused on the right thing. I don't really focus on things in the old world anymore. I feel like there's still so much to learn, so much growth, and so much value that's going to accrue in this area. I couldn't possibly go back to investing in bonds or even stocks and commodities. It's just not as interesting and not as, I don't think, and not as eventually as profitable and fruitful as the things that we're investing. But so you nailed it on the head there in minute 45 or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's right. Dan, I think we'll make this into two episodes because it's been so interesting speaking with you. I just think we'll split it up into 2 episodes because it's just been wonderful to meander through your view on what's happening both in investment and also in the technology going forward. It's been a delight, Dan. And thank you so much for your time. Now, come and visit us in Australia again. We're keen to see you. As I said, there is likely to be a FinTech festival here in April in Perth. Otherwise, if you're heading across to Sydney or Melbourne, I'd certainly fly across and catch up with you. Anytime you visit Perth, you're all welcome. And we crypto people
that's
here
so nice of you to say.
would be delighted to see you. Yeah.
Derek, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on the program.
Yep. Thank you so much for joining us, Dan. Look forward to catching up with you again sometime along the way. Bye for now. So, Dan, just wait one moment. Just in the top right-hand corner there, you'll see the uploading percentage. The purple, does it say uploaded there? Let me have a look. Where are we, Dan? 99% uploaded. So any moment now.
It says 100.
I think any moment now.
I thought there was a nice chat back and forth.
So go on.
I said I thought that was a nice chat back and forth, and I thought you made some very interesting points too.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you coming from you, Dan. Greatly appreciated. But it was delightful to be able to ask a question like that. Yeah, I did intend 20 minutes. What I'll do is I'll send it to the guys and say, how can you cut this in 2 so that we can make this as a 2-part episode? Because it's been such a great journey. I've got a great friend here. I'm a car fanatic, right? And I run a charity event here that meets every month, and 500-600 cars turn up called Classic Cars and Coffee. And so of that, of course, they're the car collectors. And over a period of time, we've become great friends. Some of them very wealthy. One of them made around 60 million out of Bitcoin, buying it at 2018 and selling it at about $60,000. He was out. He said, I'm done. And this fellow is a trader. He's always been a trader, and it's his culture. But there are others there of great wealth.
Is he long now, or what does he think now?
He has sold most of them now. However, I think he's still interested in the space and oh, by the way, he's 75. And I love
good for him.
Yeah, I love that. But there are others that I chat to who are very successful and running businesses. And despite knowing me well and us chatting about it, they still can't get their head around it. They're still struggling. You know what I mean?
Well, you know what? All you have to do is introduce the 75-year-old to them and say, yeah. My goodness, look at this. He's made fantastic profits. He's been a great trader about it. Maybe why did he buy in the first place? He sold well. That's good too.
Yep.
Why did he buy in the first place? He must have some reasons.
He actually had a financial advisor that he has known for a long time, and he took his advice and he did his own research and decided this. Look, we're not recording, so I'll tell you, the gentleman used to own a network called Cash Converters. And Cash Converters is like a porn store in the US, right? Right throughout Australia and also London. Large, listed on both exchanges way back when. In other words, he's a constant and perpetual trader and dealer. He can't help himself. He's always got a wad of cash in his back pocket in case there's an opportunity. He's the perfect mindset for looking, going, Bitcoin, how do you make money out of this? And that was it.
You know, everyone gets to where they need to get to, you know, in the way that they need to get there. So
yeah,
some people are inspired by that. Some people will be inspired by the tech and the permanent ledger. Some people will be inspired by world asset tokenization, stable coins, right? Web3. I think there's just so many different ways to get in and be inspired. That's what's I think the confirmation that we're focused in the right area.
Yeah, so, very true. Dan,
my thing is saying 99% uploading.
It's still saying 99. So I think the thing to do is if you leave your computer on, you can shut this down, the program, but if you just leave your computer on, it should just keep uploading. And my guess is that it is already uploaded. It should do, but I'll see shortly.
I shouldn't leave.
But just don't turn off the laptop.
Oh, I won't turn off the laptop, but I should leave the Riverside FM.
I don't think you need to. I think you can shut that down, and it'll just keep uploading through that. But if you want, you can just leave this and leave.
I'm just going to leave everything on, and
let it
go.
Upload. We'll look at it in 5 minutes. But once we leave, and it should just finish. But Dan, if you do come to Australia, obviously we'd love to host you. If you did come to Perth, I could definitely create the festival of Dan Tapiero. Okay.
That's very nice of you to offer. Let me tell you, I have my wife poking in here, wanting me to come down for some dessert that she's made. So she's a little bit of the boss. I don't know. It's been 25 years we're married. Yeah, it's all good. But she gave me that look like.
Yeah, we're way over time. I greatly appreciate it.
I'm not going to. No, it's all good. And it's been a complete pleasure. I really enjoyed this. I'm not going to close anything. I'm just going to leave everything open. All right?
All righty. Terrific.
Okay.
All right. Bye for now, Dan.